Welcome to our very first episode of Cloud Cafe. Today we're gonna go deep dive into AWS with definitely the go-to person. My guest today, Joris Conijn. He's been a cloud consultant for many years, but also a cloud trainer, a team leader, and an AWS Community Builder. Joris has been using AWS since the early stages, so it would be great also to know who's the person behind the cloud. When Amazon came in Europe, everybody thought, the biggest stream of revenue from Amazon was coming from retail. It makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, it was all over the place, all over the TV advertisement. But then, this is especially for non-tech people, but then you realize that actually most of the revenue comes from AWS, right? So from the web services, that so many companies using the products. I think is the very first cloud provider in the world or something.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, followed by Azure.
Not 100% sure about the order, but I think they were one of the first.
Yeah, I think we went through and we noticed like there's pretty much a space, like in terms of market for AWS is leading, and then followed by Azure, and then last but definitely not least GCP. But it's interesting to see, from the market perspective, but also from the more technical point of view, all these differences, and how people is more comfortable to use one cloud provider than the other, So what would you say is the main advantage in using AWS compared, for example, to Azure?
Well, to me, AWS at least is more built of building blocks, and Azure or GCP are more complete services. Don't get me wrong, AWS also has complete services, but they are more built of building blocks, right? So you can really build stuff that are tailored to your needs and your use cases. And that's one of the big advantages from AWS, I would say. And also when I got started with cloud computing, AWS was one of the few options that you had. So that was just my cloud of choice back at the time. And yeah, there's too much going on there in one of these cloud providers that learning them all is hard, right?
I guess.
And excel in them, right? You can learn GCP and you can learn Azure and AWS, but I made a deliberate choice to focus on one cloud provider and do it really well.
Indeed, you mentioned, you're being relatively one of the early adopters of AWS as you've been started working with it back in 2009, and you were doing software engineering back then, right?
Yeah.
And system engineering. So what pushed you the most to try on AWS and to start implementing continuously on your professional life, at least?
So no, it was actually an interesting story. As you mentioned, I started my journey as a software engineer, where I was primarily building software. And back in the day, it was still the same. I was still building software. Only we had a vision, or at least we as the company did not have a vision, but we had the opportunity to build something for a product that is today well known. That was the iPad.
Just a random name, right?
Yeah, just a random device. But that device was revolutionary on the market, right, when it came out. And I don't know if you remember when it was presented and when it was shown to the public in the first Apple Store. There was one magazine on there, which was Time magazine, with Steve Jobs on the cover. We created that magazine back in the day.
Oh, okay. That's something really. It doesn't happen every day, I guess.
No, no. So in the end, I did not build the magazine, right? The publisher did that, but the technology behind it—that's something that we built. But having one magazine is not enough, right? You want to have the next one as well. So as a company, we built a system where you can download your magazines from the internet, and all the technology needed to support that. So we built the software to do that, and we reached out to our partners and said, hey, we have software to do this. You can host it, and you can run it. But sadly, nobody took that opportunity, and I said sadly, but looking back, that was my start of my cloud journey, because nobody none of our partners was able to or willing to take up that opportunity. So we were forced to do it ourselves, and that's where my cloud journey started.
And if I'm not wrong, we mentioned like 2009, all that period. We started slightly, but approach is shifting toward more digital kind of newspaper. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least here in the Netherlands, I don't know, but the transition, of course, with the cloud services and everything helped us to smooth and to move from the paper to the more digital version. And you also said you guys were kind of the first one coming with the idea, definitely in the country at least, I believe. And let's say, talking about, for example, your involvement within AWS, right? Because you're not only a cloud consultant. That's probably your primary function,
Yep.
but you're also cloud trainer, team leader, and AWS Community Builder. Would be great also to get deeper into that. So this sounds already like a very packed schedule, dealing with the clients and your own consultants, creating projects. How do you actually spare all these things? Because they look like taking a lot of responsibility, of course.
Yeah, it's all about efficiency, I guess.
I guess.
Yeah, so being a team lead is something that I really enjoy, talking to people. So that takes some of my time, but I also reserve some time for that. So that is just in my 40 hours a week. So that's quite simple. But then you have the extra things that I do, like blogging and those kind of things, or recording a podcast, for example. Those kind of things are extra, right? That's something that you do because you have some passion for something, for some subject or whatever. And usually what I do is the things that I encounter at the customers, those are small problems, right? And when you have a small problem and you explain it in a blog, then you can publish that. And if you do that enough, then eventually you get noticed by AWS, and then you can enroll yourself in the Community Builder program. And luckily I was accepted for the second year as well. So yeah, that's how I do that. I learn the things during the job, I extract them, write a small blog post out of it, and then publish that. But yeah, it's being efficient, I guess. See where you put your time.
Yeah, it's actually great that you can condense everything within the 40-week, let's say, working hour-ish, 45, 50. Yeah, but, it's very important to recognize what's only a job and what's also passion.
Yeah.
Now, I'm far from saying that if you're going to work 80, 90 hours a week, but that's just passion, I think it's going to affect you somehow, right? But when you find the balance and you really like what you're doing, and especially in your case, you're dealing with different customers, so extending your network, getting to know more people, not only within only the tech world, but also from the business world. And you can see a lot of different case studies that indeed that you can reproduce in your own blog or within conferences or everything. And you're also an active member of the AWS user group in the Netherlands, right?
I visit a lot of meetups, yes.
Yeah, I thought at the beginning you were like a co-founder, an organizer.
No, I'm just a participant.
Just a participant. Okay. Yeah. And when did you guys start with this meetup group in the Netherlands?
I think it's a lot of years back. I need to look that up.
Okay.
I don't know that from the top of my head. But
did you see that growing, let's say, or there was already kind of pretty much a tendency given the specificity of it, like AWS? Looking around, there are still a few meetup groups in Meetup, but I dare to say none of them has the participation of the AWS user group in the Netherlands.
Yeah, so I think one of the main drivers was the quality of the talks, right? And when I started going to the meetups, they have pizzas, they have beers, and you have a fun evening with your peers. So you have a lot of conversations that you have, or you learn something new by listening to one of the the topics that they are presenting. But of course, it needs to be interesting for the audience as well, right? So having good speakers, and they don't need to be excellent speakers, right? Good with good enough for a meetup, because a meetup is low threshold style conference, right? Everybody can host something there or present something there, and that's the power of it. I believe, because you give an audience to everybody who is willing to take that. And of course, that's still a big step, right? Not everybody wants to be on stage, but it is possible to get on stage on a meetup, because it's a lower threshold.
I mean, even just taking this big pair of headphones, getting in front of a microphone, it's not easy. It's not for everybody. I mean, so I can imagine when you're on a stage, especially with a lot of people with kind of a certain professional level, they know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you should be somehow afraid to disappoint them from your technical knowledge. But at the same time, you don't want to look like the loser.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. But as you mentioned, it's pretty good to have a community and a vivid community in this case in the Netherlands.
Yeah, so what you mentioned, right? So you might be impressed or afraid that you make a mistake when you're presenting something to an audience. But in fact you have to turn it around. If you talk about your experiences that you have done, then you're always telling your own truth, right? Maybe on a technical level, you might not did it in the perfect way, or there are maybe better ways in solving that problem. But that's not your experience, and you're sharing your experience, how you did it. And then it works a lot better to present something, because then you're not teaching people, then you're sharing your experience, which makes it easier to talk about.
Indeed, true. I mean, we're not there to compare each other,
Yeah.
We're not there to contest each other. We're mainly just to share knowledge.
Yeah.
Before jumping with both hands and feet to the cloud, you've been for many years working as a system engineer, software engineer. So in a very, very low-level nutshell, let's say that you've been gaining experience on both how to build software and also making function within the system, just to have an overview. And what pushed you to go straight with the cloud, like from your background?
From my background, so when I was in school, I actually had like one of my first internships were at a preschool, managing and hosting servers, the desktop applications that the children would use to do their computer tasks on. So I learned how much work it is to actually maintain such a network, and that you want to automate those kind of things. And that's something that stuck by me in my whole journey in my professional career. Even when I was a software engineer, then you learn to code, scripting, automate small things. And then when you move to the cloud, then you think, I'm not going to do this manually. And now you have all these great APIs that you can use to automate stuff. And like I said, when we started out rolling this system where you can download magazines on your iPad, that was still a small group of people managing a fleet of servers worldwide. And that was only possible because we used automation. And that is one of the key drivers for everything that I do. Everything needs to be automated, because then you can control it in a more in an easier manner. It becomes maintainable. And also predictable, because if you automate something, it might be wrong, but it's consistently wrong. So if you fix it, you have fixed it everywhere. So, and that's one of the big advantages of the cloud.
Definitely, and then you also consider, of course, you have the chance, like if you're working in teams, you have some real-time results, about what you're doing, and with the automation, you can speed up the whole delivery process.
Yeah.
And well, as you've been working for many years with a product company, right? What was your first impression when you moved to consultancy? Because, you can have a lot of technical capabilities, but within consultancy, you also have to develop other areas like soft skills, especially when you're having your first encounter with the clients. And not everybody is instantly fluent with that. So it might take some time. So what was your very first challenge that you faced? Or did you already have this kind of power?
I don't think I had that power. I had it in me, but
okay.
no, it was frightening, I would say, the first time that I did a consulting job. It was new, and which is okay, right? Going out of your comfort zone helps you develop and grow as a person. So doing something new, that really helps. I did not see myself as a consultant to begin with, but in the end, I think I'm pretty okay at it. But yeah, it's more people and less technical. Don't get me wrong, you're still doing technical jobs, but you also need to explain how you did it, make sure that the customer actually can maintain it when you're left the company, or at least when you're on your next assignment. They need to run the show themselves, right? So it's really important to transfer this knowledge to the customer and do it in an efficient manner as well. And that requires to talk to people, and that, you need some skills for that to do that effectively.
Definitely. I also believe, for people like you having the technical knowledge, you might keep your conversation technically wise, let's say, but if you're talking with stakeholders or more business people, they might have some sort, of technicality behind, but more from the theoretical perspective, at least if they don't have a technical background by themselves. So I think one of the best skills is, to be so good in what you're doing that you're able to translate it very down to earth, for them to, have an idea, first of all, what you're talking about, to reassure them, because it's their business at the end of the day that you're supporting.
Yeah.
And I think it's really kind of challenging, especially if you're used to a certain vocabulary, let's say, in a way of talking. And then also you have to consider, the business factor. You have to convince sometimes the stakeholders that your decision is maybe better than the one that we're forecasting.
Yeah, so as a consultant, when you come into a different company, there are skilled people there as well, right? That does not mean that they are doing the right thing. You're also there for a reason, right? But yeah, convincing those other experts that they might not do it in an ideal way, that takes some skills indeed. But also when you're talking to less technical people, right? Explaining why this needs to happen in a different manner, that helps if you can remove the technical jargon and make it more, what does this actually mean for the business, right? If we do it this way. Often helped changing it to money-wise, right? This is more expensive if we do it this way, or the other way around. This is it looks like this is a cheaper way, but you are only looking at your cloud bill and not the FTE that you need to run this, right? If you don't apply automation, then you have people doing the work, and people are more expensive than computers. So,
how many companies would you say, in the average, are having this kind of mindset without looking only the monetary perspective? Let's say the monetary part of it.
Yeah, and a company in its whole is hard to say, right? It's always the people that you work with, right? They say, no, this is more expensive, so we do it this route. And that's more the technical implementation of a feature. Because they don't see what the people are costing as well, right? So it's hard for me to do a number on how many companies look at it that way. But I think it's in every company. You have a couple of people doing that. And I think in some companies, maybe 80% of the people are doing that. And in some companies, only 10 or 20%.
True. Working within consultancy, you might come across a lot of firms that are, choosing the product or the service in this case because it's cheaper than the other, And it's kind of crazy that you have to tell them how this can backfire them, because it should be pretty predictable, So sometimes you might wonder, okay, what's the actual added value behind,
Yeah, indeed. For example, you will hear it that people switch cloud providers just for whatever reason, but they tend to forget that they have people who might love the cloud that they are working in, and now you're saying, no, you cannot do AWS anymore, now you're going to do Azure. Probably a good portion of your staff will look for a new job just because of that decision. And people are really hard to attract these days. So, yeah. And the same applies for multi-cloud strategies, for instance. If you want to have 2 cloud providers to have a backup, or then you know that you're paying the price for being compatible with 2 cloud providers at the same time. But you can also say, well, when we want to move, we will pay the bill then, right? So we're not taking into the factor that we might want to switch to a different cloud. So these are all mindsets, and I'm not saying that it's not good to have that mindset, or not good to have a multi-cloud strategy. It's more like you need to be aware of the costs of it and make it a deliberate choice of doing that.
When we talk about AWS event, we mention, of course, our meetup group, other events within the Netherlands, but I think everybody has an idea, one of the biggest events of AWS, that is in Vegas.
Yeah.
reInvent. How was your latest experience in AWS reInvent Vegas? Were you there on 2022, right? The past edition?
Yeah, I was.
How was it? Saw
Yeah.
tons of pictures and video about it. Tell me.
Yeah, it's just an awesome event. So from a learning perspective, there are like 4 hotels hosting sessions. So, and each hotel has like 20 or 30 rooms available with all sorts of tracks. So there is a lot of choice that you have from sessions. Getting into those sessions is a little bit harder, as you can imagine, because if thousands of people walking there, getting into the session that you want to attend is a little bit harder. But luckily, the majority of the sessions are also recorded, so you can watch them back on YouTube later on as well. But the event itself is just like 1 week of information overload, and you talk a lot of people. You have nice conversations with them, and you exchange ideas. It's the breeding place of new ideas, right? So you talk to somebody, and they give you that spark that you needed to continue on something that you were already working on, or you might pivot your idea based on something that you have seen in one of these sessions. To me, it's just like an awesome place to learn. It's a tough week because
I can imagine.
It's still Vegas, so there are a few parties going on there, and also it's a long flight from the Netherlands, so you get there and you're a little bit exhausted.
A little bit. Did you have jet lag or something?
Yeah. So it's depending on how you fly, but it's roughly between the 11 and 14 hours, depending if you have a layover or something. And then the time difference is 9 hours, which is also interesting. And then you start your week of learning, and learning new things is also quite exhausting. And then you have some parties, which is also exhausting. So at the end of the week, I slept from 8 till 8, I believe.
To recover.
To recover, yeah.
I promise you that I wouldn't have addressed any question about the parties in Vegas. So we might keep this kind of content for another day. But I think it's also an incredible opportunity to get to know more people from around the world, because I can imagine, despite being hosted in the States, you might find literally tons of people from everywhere, Europe, Asia, whenever.
Yeah, so as a community builder also, they have like a special area in the expo hall where you can meet other community builders, and they have small parties where you can mingle and meet other community builders. And then you have a really diverse group of people, because they try to keep the community builder program also very diverse, right? Not only Americans or not only males, right? So they try to keep it inclusive, which is interesting, because when you then go to these areas where you can meet other community builders, you for example, I talked to someone from South Africa, which is, for me, and maybe I'm a little bit detached from the world then, but I wouldn't expect to talk to someone from South Africa in Las Vegas. And I did, and it was amazing. It was a good conversation. So, and actually, he also had great stories on things that he built. So, sharing that knowledge is not only within your own group, right? It's over the whole world. And that is what happens in Vegas during re-event. And that makes it an awesome event to go to. But yeah, it's a bit exhausting.
Planning to do a sort of rematch this year?
I am.
You are?
Yeah.
It's set around November, right?
November, yeah. The end of the November. And I believe beginning of December it ends.
And it's going to be always 1 week?
Yeah,
it's 1 week. Full
Yeah.
experience.
And I believe that the Formula One is right after it. Unfortunately, I'm not staying, but...
Not taking the 2 weekends.
No.
Now, I can imagine such kind of holiday is going to be pretty consuming in a good way, but you have a limited amount of energy through the day. So as the role of consultant, you're pretty much involved within the network, but you're also very exposed, let's say, to other companies, potential colleague, potential recruiters, So, did you already deactivate your LinkedIn email? How many emails do you receive daily on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I stopped counting them.
Stop counting?
Yeah.
You stop replying as well?
I never replied.
I never replied.
Yeah.
Okay, problem solved.
No, so some of them are okay how they approach you, but the majority don't even read like your resume, right?
I can imagine. Recruiters out there, please do us a favor. Always read the details of the person that you're reading now. Please. Whether it's a tech or non-tech, whether it's cloud. Otherwise, Joris is not going to reply.
No, I'm not.
I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, I think also given the market, there's a lot of rush. It's like a gold rush, especially for cloud professionals in country like the Netherlands, in which the amount of jobs that are available are far more, than the available talent. And despite dealing with foreign talent, it always looks like the demand is always higher than the offer.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But you also see like the majority of the cases that I see as well, right? So they hire some people to do some job, and then they want to work agile in some cases, but they're really not working. So the organizations are not really optimized to work in that way. And then you need a lot of manpower to solve a small thing. You can also do the transformation a little bit different, that you make the organization in such a way that you can actually work on a more agile way. And then you need less people to do the same job because you have less rules or bureaucracy or whatever, right? Sometimes you have to just wait until you can do your job because you're waiting on somebody else. That's not efficient at all.
True. You just reminded me, there was this chapter of this book that is called Rework, change the way you were working or something like that. And actually one of this chapter is saying something really powerful. That is like hire only when it hurts, only when it's necessary. First of all, because if we take a consultancy firm, for example, you don't want to have people on the bench, right? So you don't want to have eventually to pay for people that is not engaged in project, to have a person that is not satisfied with the job and what they're doing. I mean, forget the money for a second, even if it's a big word within consultancies. But indeed, you should be aware about, first of all, who you need to cover the position, which is already a big thing, And secondly, you must make sure that you really need this person for the purpose of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a good point there, because if you hire someone for a specific role and you think, well, he can do this job, but if he's not happy doing that job, then he will probably work there for a couple of months and then he will find a job that he loves doing, right? So in the end, you put a lot of energy in hiring this person, and then he will just leave because he's not satisfied in his job.
Let's deep dive a little bit about the person behind the cloud, right? So where are you mainly busy when you're not working? What do you like to do? We know that you have a small brewery business, right? At your place.
Yeah, business.
Business.
Yeah, I have a microbrewery, yeah.
Microbrewery, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that. So when Corona started, the year before that, I got married, and I got a basket like a 5-liter basket where you can brew your own beer with. So then when Corona started, I started picking up that hobby because I had it laying around. And I really enjoyed it. So it's a fun process. So at first I ordered like a refill package.
Okay.
And then I thought, well, this is 5 liters. This is not... It's a lot of work.
I thought you were saying it's not going to last that much.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for not that much.
Okay.
So I looked into my options and I actually bought a 30-liter tank, which I can use to brew my beers. And my output is roughly around the 70 bottles per batch, which I really enjoy doing. All right, it's calming. It's just like it's a process, and the outcome is every time it's different because it's really the process itself. Right, if you're a temperature degrees off, then it has a different effect on the beer. So I cannot make a constant beer, but it's close. And I never try to copy a second beer at the same time, right? So I always try something new. So the consistency in that matter is not that important for me. But yeah, I really enjoy doing that.
I can imagine also the whole process, is kind of sensitive, It might take not that much to completely ruin the beer. So you've been doing this for, let's say, 3 years-ish?
Yeah.
Since COVID. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's not only that, right? It's the brewing, and then in the end, it's the drinking of the beer.
The most pleasurable part.
Yeah, it is. But also sharing with friends, right?
Sure.
And actually, my father-in-law makes labels for me. So I think of a name of a beer, and I will just send it to him, and then he builds a label for me, and then I stick that on the bottles. So they actually look like professional beers.
Lovely. So what's the part of the side business that you said is not?
I don't sell them.
Not yet.
I just gave them away.
All right.
Yeah, so sometimes I also brought them to the office once in a while here. So
maybe you can give an X-key about brewery, don't you?
I already did. Yeah.
You already did?
Yeah.
Damn it, I missed it.
Yeah, so that is one of the things that I like doing with brewing. It's not only the brewing, right? It's also the process, ordering the grains, but also looking at the equipment that you need. And actually, I had like a floating device that you put in your fermenting basket, and then based on how tilted it is, you can read the fermentation process. So how far along is it? And that's connected through Wi-Fi. And how you can use that. That's also the technology part again that interests me in these kind of things. So yeah, I gave an XKE session on how you could do that and how you can build your own infrastructure in the cloud also based on that.
How many participants did you have? The whole company, I guess?
No. I booked a small room and I did a cap on it because I didn't want too many people. No, there were like 10 people or so.
All right.
But yeah, that's the fun thing from an XKE, right? It's small. And it's really a low threshold to give one.
Indeed. At the same time, we can host pretty much every topic. In Xebia, we love to have knowledge exchange sessions once a month. And whatever topic, it can be something deeply technical related that consultants love, also non-consultants, but can also be something personal. We love to discuss about personal journeys, self-development, passions, everything. Because at the end of the day, knowledge sharing is not only necessarily what you do with your job. It is, but it's not the whole picture, And in this case, in your case, you brought something that you have knowledge about it, that you like to do it. And it's also fun, It's like to have some extra information and maybe we don't necessarily think about it,
Yeah. But that's it. It's like you mentioned it, right? It's not only work. It's also your personal life also needs to be in balance with work life. And that also means that you need to do things personally that you enjoy doing. Otherwise, it's not in balance. So sharing those things on an XKey is just as important as any other technical topic. I mean, as long as it's inspiring, fun, or you can learn something, it's good.
It's on it.
Yeah.
And we always have some very tasty food afterwards. Just saying. But let's go back for a second about training within the workplace, right? tech training in this case. So this industry, of course, it's all about be updated with the latest features, latest trend. And tell me more about you being a cloud trainer, like how it's usually, dealing with these people that has already technical background, but maybe sometimes they're missing something. And maybe, as you mentioned earlier, it's not even necessarily technically related, but it's more organizationally related.
Yeah. So coming back at the fact that I'm a software engineer, I have a lot of experience with building software and especially test-driven software development. And there, when I went to my first customers, I noticed that this test-driven thing is not something that is applied everywhere, right? So I was placed in a team where there was no testing at all, and I was just like, how can you do this? You need to know that the things that you build are actually working, and you can test it in a live environment, but that's not ideal, right? So I implemented a strategy to apply testing, and then I did a workshop internally at that customer just to show the rest of the team on how you could do this.
That is, sorry to interrupt you for a second, but this is kind of crazy, right? So this company was kind of building their own product, let's say.
No. They just had like a system that they used internally, right?
Okay.
And
all right. Because imagine like building your own product and going straight to the market without testing, that would be basically a suicide.
Yeah. This was typically where you see these kind of things is more internally and not customer focused. But testing needs to happen everywhere, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Because maybe so if you don't test your end product and you ship it to your customers, the effects are immediately shown. But internally, it's less visible. But still, in the end, they will cause you problems. Because if you have a system for hosting your workloads in AWS, for instance, if you have a landing zone, for example, but you have components in there which are not tested, and then you do something different than it should, or something changed, and then it breaks, and then nobody knows how it works, and then you look in the code and you're like, oh yeah, we only implemented this one scenario.
And then you have to go all the way back and look for what is missing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, and when you have a test-driven approach, it's more like, hey, how can this be used? How can this be abused? And then you build your test cases, and then you run it, and then you implement all the pods and the behavior that you want in that specific use case. So, and that helps you to be more resilient for failure in the end. But coming back to the training, so that's where I started to enjoy or notice that I liked the fact that I've built something and I made a small workshop out of it, and I teach that workshop to my colleagues in the team there. And in the end, they were really grateful that I did that, because it was not that they were not willing to apply test-driven development. They didn't know how, because nobody in the team knew how. And then when I joined the team, that's how I work. So I just did my work as I did it normally. But then you have the problem, you've built something that the team also needs to be able to maintain when you leave. And that's where I started with the workshop, and noticing that I really enjoyed giving trainings. And that inspired me to do it a bit more. Still enjoying it.
I think indeed it's also, when you can kind of combine, again, your technical knowledge with the people. Yep. It's like a missing block. Nothing against, of course, like more product-related companies when it's more like individual work, but working with the people, whether it's with your team, with external company, and see them growing. It's also for personal satisfaction, right? Because you have the feeling that what you learned, what you implemented is right and is working.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So for me, it's sharing what you have learned, right? I can gather all this information for myself and then do nothing with it, or I can share it with other people. And with sharing it, at least I have the idea that I'm giving something back as well, right? I'm going to Las Vegas now to re-event to learn stuff. So I also want to share all the things that I've learned, all the times that I went there to Las Vegas. All the things made me who I am today. And that's how I know certain things about the cloud and how AWS evolved over time. And that's something that I want to give back to the community as well, right? So yeah, teaching is a part of that, yeah.
Continuous learning.
Continuous learning, always, yeah, indeed.
All right, Joris, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, for letting us know about your soon-to-be side business, brewery, and most importantly, for sharing your knowledge about your cloud expertise and consultancy.
Yeah, thank you.
Please, guys, stay tuned with us. We're going to soon record another episode of Cloud Cafe, our new concept to discuss the latest cloud updates and also to get to know more about who is the person behind the cloud. Our next episode is going to host Jorge, which is our go-to person when it comes to Google Cloud Platform. Thank you for being with us.